devoted second husband that crushed her ex's pride. Before we begin, I send you a heartfelt prayer. May God bless your journey with victory, fill your home with everlasting joy, and grant every hidden dream of your soul. Do me a favor, my beautiful family. Tap that like button and comment below, "I stand with my brother." Now let us begin the most powerful and heart-touching story, written with love. They buried her alive, not knowing she was a seed meant to grow into a mighty tree. Nayeli's reflection in the polished conference table showed a woman whose presence commanded attention without demanding it, her quiet authority filling the boardroom of the Metropolitan Cultural Foundation as she concluded another transformative decision. The meeting had ended with unanimous approval for her proposal to fund 50 emerging artists from underrepresented communities, each receiving full studio space and mentorship for 2 years. The paintings, adorning her penthouse walls, told stories that major galleries had overlooked. Kaya Lamont had created the landscape above the fireplace while working as a night janitor, her hands still bearing traces of cleaning chemicals as her brushes captured dreams on canvas during pre-dawn hours. Now European museums displayed Kaya's work. Her granddaughters attended prestigious schools, and art critics who once dismissed her competed for exclusive interviews. Standing before Kaya's masterpiece, Nayeli remembered discovering the elderly woman's artwork stored in cardboard boxes behind a Queen's laundromat. The same vision that recognized Kaya's brilliance had filled these walls with treasures others had dismissed. Tanner Dewayne's sculptures carved from discarded subway materials, Brielle Lakeisha's portraits painted on salvaged wood panels, Kenyon Rashad's installations built from Hurricane Sandy debris. Each piece represented transformation beyond artistic achievement. Each represented a life elevated, a dream realized, a voice finally heard. The reunion invitation rested alone among dozens of prestigious opportunities, its formal script announcing an event that would force her to confront the person she had once been. Westbridge Academy wanted their graduates to return after 14 years, to reconnect and celebrate shared memories. The irony struck her deeply. The institution that had made her feel invisible now sought to claim credit for her visibility. 14 years had passed since graduation in Connecticut. 14 years since Braylon Ashworth convinced her that marriage would elevate her from scholarship student to legitimate member of their exclusive world. 14 years since he abandoned her for Tanisha, his secretary, leaving divorce papers and a cruel note about her inadequacy for his social aspirations. That devastated girl bore no resemblance to the woman who now influenced major museum acquisitions across 3 continents. The teenager who cleaned classrooms had become the patron ensuring no talented artist ever worked in isolation again. The young woman who felt invisible had become someone impossible to overlook. The elevator announced the arrival of the only person with private access to her sanctuary. Even before Jalen appeared, she recognized his confident stride across the marble floors, his presence transforming the impressive space into something that felt genuinely welcoming. Still considering whether to attend, Jalen's voice carried warmth that had become essential to her daily happiness. After 8 months of marriage, his morning arrival still brought excitement for whatever challenges they might face together. At 33, Jalen possessed something rare among the wealthy: authentic humility paired with purposeful action. The Constantine Foundation for Educational Excellence had provided scholarships for over 15,000 students across 13 years, yet Jalen never publicized his generosity. His inherited fortune served as a tool for social transformation rather than personal aggrandizement. "The invitation assumes people want to return to who they used to be," Nayeli said, watching the city awaken below. "Some of us prefer who we became." Jalen joined her at the window, his hand finding hers with practiced ease. "Braylon will be there." Social media shows he's now a regional insurance manager married to Tanisha. 3 children, suburban routine, mortgage payments. Everything he thought marrying me would prevent him from achieving. The morning light highlighted the confidence that had replaced uncertainty, the grace earned through overcoming pain. At 32, she possessed what Braylon had never understood, the ability to recognize potential others missed, to nurture talent institutions ignored, to create bridges where others built barriers. Her phone displayed a message from Winona Jalea, director of the Metropolitan Museum's Contemporary Acquisitions. The text included photographs from the previous evening's private viewing, where 3 artists Nayeli had discovered received offers from major collectors. Sequoia Jamari's mixed media installations exploring urban Native American identity had sold internationally. Dakota Ania's photography, documenting forgotten neighborhoods, had been acquired by the Library of Congress. Phoenix Tavian's digital art bridging traditional and contemporary techniques had sparked competitive bidding among technology executives. Careers launched through careful mentorship. Dreams realized via patient support. Futures secured by someone who understood the struggle for recognition. Each success represented months of guidance, years of encouragement, decades of believing in talent when artists doubted themselves. "I created something they couldn't destroy," Nayeli said, gesturing toward walls displaying her discoveries. "When Braylon left, he expected me to disappear into whatever limited life he imagined I deserved. Instead, I became someone who ensures talented people never disappear." The transformation extended beyond personal achievement. The Rising Voices Cultural Center had evolved from experimental project to established institution, its programming replicated nationwide. The newly announced Constantine Nayeli Foundation combined resources from both family legacies to create educational and cultural opportunities honoring their grandparents' collaborative history while addressing contemporary challenges. Chapter 2. The Seeds of Love. True love plants. Seeds in silence and tends gardens in the shadows. The autumn of 2008 painted Westbridge Academy's Connecticut campus in brilliant colors, but Jalen Constantine focused entirely on the girl studying alone in the library's corner. While other students filled mahogany common rooms with chatter about weekend plans in the Hamptons, she remained absorbed in books with intensity that revealed dreams too important to risk on social distractions. Nayeli possessed something rare among their privileged classmates: authentic hunger for knowledge rather than grades, genuine curiosity rather than competition. She read beyond requirements, exploring authors professors barely mentioned. Her essays demonstrated insights that surprised veteran teachers accustomed to students viewing education as expensive obligation rather than transformative opportunity. Jalen had inherited billions at 17 when his parents died in a private plane crash, leaving him guardian of wealth spanning 4 generations. The Constantine family name guaranteed university admission, commanded boardroom respect, and opened every door in New York society. Yet watching Nayeli struggle to balance 3 jobs while maintaining academic excellence, he realized money couldn't purchase what she possessed, motivation born from necessity rather than entitlement. She worked before dawn cleaning administrative offices, her movements efficient and invisible while security guards dozed. Between classes, she shelved library books, organizing thousands of volumes with care, suggesting each might contain life-changing information. Evenings found her tutoring struggling classmates, earning hourly wages saved toward college applications and dormitory deposits. While classmates attended Broadway shows and dined where appetizers cost more than her weekly earnings, Nayeli studied in empty classrooms and ate carefully budgeted meals prepared from ingredients purchased with calculated precision. During junior year, Jalen began creating small interventions without revealing his involvement. When budget cuts threatened her library position, an anonymous donation restored funding. When her laptop crashed before a major deadline, surplus equipment mysteriously appeared at the computer lab. When scholarship reductions might have forced her departure, a new endowment emerged precisely large enough to secure her place through graduation. Each intervention required careful planning to avoid detection. He learned her schedule, habits, fears, and aspirations through patient observation rather than direct conversation. She wanted to study art history, but worried about career prospects. She dreamed of European museum visits, but doubted affordability. She hoped to create social impact, but feared background limitations. That summer, Jalen established the Constantine Foundation for Educational Excellence, officially a general scholarship program, but designed specifically to help students facing the barriers that defined Nayeli's experience. His grandfather had emphasized using wealth for social good, and supporting educational access honored that legacy while addressing contemporary needs. The Foundation's first initiatives supported underrepresented students, demonstrating academic excellence despite economic challenges. Recipients received comprehensive assistance, financial support, mentorship, internship opportunities, and networking access that could transform career trajectories. What began as help for people like Nayeli grew into systematic support, eventually assisting thousands over the following decade. But Nayeli's heart belonged to Braylon Ashworth, whose effortless popularity represented everything she thought she wanted. Braylon possessed casual confidence from never doubting his place, the kind of magnetic charm that drew admiration without effort. His family owned textile businesses across multiple states, vacation properties on 2 continents, and social connections guaranteeing opportunities regardless of academic performance. Graduation arrived with Nayeli radiant in cap and gown, scholarship medallions gleaming as symbols of achievement earned through determination rather than privilege. Columbia had accepted her with a full fellowship for graduate studies in art history, her future bright with possibilities. Braylon announced their engagement during the ceremony, presenting a diamond ring that sparkled impressively, but couldn't match her smile's brilliance. Watching them pose for photographs, Jalen felt simultaneous heartbreak and healing. The woman he loved was happy, which mattered most. Her happiness currently depended on someone unworthy, but that was tomorrow's concern. Today, she graduated with honors, engaged to marry, and prepared for graduate studies, pursuing lifelong dreams. Jalen graduated, knowing he had learned life's most important lesson: true love plants seeds in silence and tends gardens in shadows, trusting that patience and dedication eventually yield intended harvests. Chapter 3. The Foundation's First Gift. Sometimes angels work through scholarship, programs, and anonymous grants. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday in March 2014, delivered by courier who seemed embarrassed to bear such devastating news. Nayeli signed with hands trembling from shock rather than cold, suddenly understanding her 3-year marriage had officially ended. Braylon hadn't delivered documents personally, choosing legal proceedings over direct conversation. The settlement contained no surprises, only confirmation of suspicions growing for months. Braylon cited irreconcilable differences, though both knew the real reason. Tanisha, his secretary, whose family connections and polished sophistication made her more suitable for his social ambitions. The financial agreement offered minimal compensation given their brief marriage and her negligible monetary contribution. 3 years had taught painful lessons about love versus infatuation, partnership versus performance. Braylon had married her idea rather than her reality, drawn to novelty but disappointed by her failure to transform into the socialite wife he required. Her genuine cultural interests hadn't translated into networking advantages, and her gratitude for luxury hadn't evolved into sophisticated confidence, marking women born to wealth. The Manhattan apartment overlooked Central Park from impressive heights, its designer furnishings representing a lifestyle that had never truly belonged to her. Packing belongings into 3 suitcases and 2 boxes created pathetically small representation of 3 married years. Books Braylon had mocked as impractical, Clothes purchased before marriage, plus few designer pieces that never felt natural, and photographs documenting happiness, now seeming artificial, standing in what had been their shared bedroom, surrounded by the remnants of a life that had never truly been hers. Nayeli felt the crushing weight of starting over at 21. The crystal perfume bottles on the vanity, gifts from Braylon's mother, seemed to mock her with their expensive emptiness. The walk-in closet that had once symbolized her rise in status now felt like a tomb, filled with clothes she had worn to play a role she had never mastered. Each designer piece told a story of inadequacy. The black cocktail dress she had worn to his company holiday party, where colleagues' wives had made polite conversation while their eyes assessed her worth. The pearls she had clutched during dinner parties, where she had smiled and nodded, while discussions of vacation homes and private schools made her feel like an imposter. The shoes that had pinched her feet during charity galas, where her discomfort had been both physical and emotional. The wedding photos scattered across the bed showed a young woman who had believed that love could transform circumstances, that marriage could be a bridge between worlds rather than a performance she was destined to fail. The engagement ring Braylon had presented with such flourish now seemed like costume jewelry from a play that had closed before the final act. The studio apartment she could afford measured under 400 square feet and required lengthy subway commutes to reach Columbia, where she was completing her master's degree. After years of expansive luxury, the confinement felt claustrophobic, but solitude provided relief from constant pressure to perform sophistication she'd never genuinely possessed. Moving day arrived with a humiliation she hadn't anticipated. The doorman, who had always greeted her warmly, now avoided eye contact. The superintendent, who had once rushed to fix any minor inconvenience, now spoke to her with barely concealed disdain, as if her changed circumstances were somehow contagious. The marble lobby that had once made her feel successful now felt like a gauntlet of judgment. Financial reality struck immediately. Credit cards, funding, graduate expenses were tied to accounts Braylon controlled, leaving her with student debt and no payment means. Her part-time research position provided barely enough for rent and basics, with nothing remaining for textbooks, conference fees, and research materials graduate education demanded. The first weeks brought daily indignities that no one had prepared her for. Declined cards at the campus bookstore while other students waited behind her, eating ramen noodles for the third consecutive night while calculating whether she could afford both laundry detergent and a Metro card for the week. Sitting in the library not just to study, but because it was warm and she had learned to ration her heating bills. 8 weeks post-divorce, salvation arrived via official Constantine Foundation letterhead. The envelope contained congratulations for selection as recipient of the newly established Constantine Fellowship for Emerging Cultural Leaders. Comprehensive support covering tuition, living expenses, research costs, and professional development for graduate students pursuing art history, museum studies, or cultural preservation. The fellowship description seemed crafted specifically for her circumstances, offering exactly what she needed to complete her degree without compromising academic focus. Selection criteria emphasized excellence, cultural commitment, and background suggesting understanding of economic educational barriers. Reading requirements, Nayeli felt someone had observed her situation and designed targeted assistance. Winona Jalia, the Foundation's program director, called within hours. Her genuine enthusiasm made the fellowship feel like recognition rather than charity, supporting exceptional promise while removing financial stress that prevented advanced education achievement. We believe economic barriers shouldn't prevent talented students from pursuing advanced degrees, Winona explained. The Constantine Foundation specifically supports students demonstrating promise while facing obstacles that inherited privilege never encounters. The fellowship included mentorship with museum professionals, prestigious internships, and networking events shaping career trajectories. Previous recipients had become museum directors, gallery owners, cultural critics, and arts administrators at organizations ranging from community centers to internationally renowned institutions. Within weeks, her circumstances stabilized dramatically. The fellowship enabled quitting part-time jobs to focus entirely on coursework and research. Better housing, necessary materials, and conference attendance became affordable. Stress-consuming mental energy since divorce began fading, replaced by excitement about previously unimaginable opportunities. Her thesis advisor immediately noticed improved work quality and engagement. Without financial distraction, Nayeli devoted herself to research on overlooked women artists of the early 20th century, combining personal interest in recognizing underrepresented voices with scholarly investigation of historical art movements. What she couldn't know was that the fellowship had been established specifically considering her circumstances, designed by someone who understood her struggles and recognized exceptional potential. Every monthly payment carried an invisible message about worthiness, deserving support, and capability for achievements that would eventually transform countless other lives. Chapter 4. The Gallery of Dreams. When you uplift others, the universe conspires to elevate you too. The Whitney Museum's rejection letter arrived the same day Nayeli successfully defended her master's thesis, creating triumph immediately followed by crushing disappointment. Her exhibition proposal, showcasing forgotten women artists she'd researched for 2 years, had been declined with polite dismissiveness, suggesting discoveries lacked commercial appeal necessary for major programming. Public interest in rediscovered women artists has been adequately addressed by recent exhibitions, the curator explained with bureaucratic coldness. While demonstrating scholarly merit, we question whether these particular artists possess significance justifying our investment. Similar rejections from the Museum of Modern Art, Metropolitan Museum, and Guggenheim acknowledged research quality while declining resource commitment. Each response recognized academic merit but avoided supporting presentations to public audiences. The problem wasn't scholarship, but practical considerations of visitor draw and revenue generation. Museums operated as businesses requiring exhibitions to produce sufficient interest for justifying costs. Unknown artists, regardless of historical importance, couldn't guarantee attendance and merchandise sales that established names provided. 3 weeks post-Whitney rejection, Nayeli received a call that would transform her career trajectory and understanding of how cultural change actually happened. J.C. Tanisha from the Constantine Foundation invited presentation of her exhibition proposal to their Cultural Programs Committee, explaining exploration of projects traditional institutions might consider uncommercial. "We've followed your research through fellowship reports," J.C. explained enthusiastically. "The foundation interests itself in supporting projects advancing cultural understanding, particularly those recovering overlooked contributions to American art history." The foundation had recently acquired a former warehouse in Chelsea, converting it into innovative exhibition space designed for projects traditional museums might consider risky. The Constantine Cultural Center would operate differently from conventional institutions, prioritizing historical significance and educational value over commercial considerations. Preparation required synthesizing 2 years of research into compelling arguments for contemporary attention to these particular artists. She organized evidence, selected powerful work examples, and crafted narratives helping audiences understand historical contexts leading to their obscurity. The boardroom presentation addressed foundation trustees, cultural advisors, and potential donors empowered to transform academic research into public education. Nayeli stood before projection screens, displaying images discovered in private collections and family estates. explaining each artist's contributions to modernist movements despite exclusion from standard historical accounts. Sage Zendaya had developed innovative textile techniques, influencing fashion and interior design throughout the 1930s. But her work had been dismissed as craft rather than art due to gender bias. Orenda Davis's paintings exploring Native American identity through modernist techniques had been ignored by critics unable to reconcile traditional subjects with contemporary methods. Each story revealed systematic exclusion patterns, shaping art historical narratives for decades. These women had been productive, innovative, and influential within artistic communities, but institutional bias and commercial considerations prevented deserved recognition. Recovery wasn't just historical accuracy, it was understanding how cultural value gets determined and preserved. The vote was unanimous. The Constantine Cultural Center would commit inaugural exhibition space to hidden voices, timeless visions, recovering America's forgotten women artists. The foundation would fund research expansion, artifact loans, catalog production, and educational programming, giving Nayeli complete curatorial authority. The exhibition opened 18 months later to crowds exceeding projections and critical responses, validating faith in her discoveries. Reviews called it revelatory examination of how artistic merit gets obscured by social prejudice and essential viewing for understanding American modernism's full scope. More importantly, the exhibition achieved its primary goal: recovering recognition for forgotten artists. Galleries began representing featured artists' estates, museums purchased works for permanent collections, and scholars initiated research exploring similar historical exclusion patterns. The Constantine Foundation had accomplished something unprecedented, creating space where cultural value could be determined by historical significance rather than market forces, where academic discoveries could reach public audiences without compromising scholarly integrity. Chapter 5. The First Proposal. Some hearts speak when the garden is ready, even if the gardener isn't. The Constantine Cultural Center had become Nayeli's professional home by autumn 2016, its soaring ceilings and exposed brick providing perfect backdrop for her second major exhibition. Voices from the margins drew even larger crowds than her inaugural show, with visitors traveling nationally to see Depression-era artists who had documented social change through community murals and public art. Success brought unexpected opportunities. The Smithsonian offered her assistant curator positions. Universities recruited her for faculty roles, and private collectors sought expertise in acquisition evaluation. At 23, she had established herself as one of the country's most promising young curators, recognized for identifying overlooked contributions and presenting them with scholarly and popular appeal. But professional fulfillment couldn't address personal loneliness, deepening with each achievement. Divorce from Braylon had left emotional scars resistant to healing, and curatorial demands left little time for developing new relationships. She had devoted herself to research and exhibition development so intensely that personal connections had withered from neglect. The loneliness was particularly acute during moments of professional triumph. Standing before packed exhibition spaces, surrounded by conversations about the artists she had rescued from obscurity, she often felt isolated by her success. The few men she had dated since the divorce seemed either intimidated by her growing reputation or attracted to it for the wrong reasons. None understood that her work was not simply a career but a calling, a way of ensuring that talented voices would never again be silenced by institutional neglect. The Constantine Foundation's annual gala invitation arrived with handwritten note from J.C. Tanisha. "We hope you'll celebrate 5 years of cultural programming and remarkable fellowship recipient achievements." The event would honor scholarship recipients who had achieved significant careers, with Nayeli featured as keynote speaker, representing the Foundation's commitment to supporting unconventional projects. Speech preparation required reflecting on how dramatically her life had changed since receiving the fellowship 2 years earlier. The woman who had signed divorce papers in cramped studio space had become someone whose exhibition catalogues were studied in graduate seminars and whose curatorial decisions influenced major institutional American art history approaches. The weeks leading up to the gala brought unexpected anxiety. Speaking about her transformation meant acknowledging how completely her life had changed, how the devastated divorcee had evolved into someone who commanded respect in circles that had once seemed impossibly elite. It also meant potentially facing the Foundation's leadership, including family members she had never met, but whose generosity had fundamentally altered her trajectory. The gala transformed the Foundation's restored, Gilded Age mansion headquarters into elegant event space, preserving architectural grandeur. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over guests representing philanthropy, culture, and academic achievement intersections. Museum directors mingled with artists, scholars conversed with donors, and Foundation staff moved seamlessly, ensuring every detail contributed to celebration and possibility atmospheres. Preparing her keynote address in the green marble powder room, Nayeli caught sight of herself in the ornate mirror and marveled at the transformation. The woman looking back wore confidence like a second skin, her posture reflecting years of standing before hostile museum boards and winning them over with passion and expertise. The scholarship girl, who had once felt invisible in spaces like this, now belonged here by right of achievement rather than charity. Nayeli's speech focused on institutional support and creative risk-taking relationships, explaining how Foundation willingness to fund unconventional projects enabled discoveries traditional sources would never support. She described identifying forgotten artists, convincing institutions to display their work, and satisfaction from seeing historical narratives expanded to include previously excluded voices. The Constantine Foundation doesn't just fund individual projects, she concluded. It invests in possibilities that our cultural understanding can be transformed by discoveries challenging conventional wisdom. Every exhibition, publication, educational program represents commitment that history belongs to everyone, not just those recorded by the most powerful voices. Enthusiastic applause followed, but her attention was captured by a figure near the room's back, Jalen Constantine, whose presence she hadn't expected, but whose face brought memories of Westbridge Academy and complicated teenage emotions. After formal presentations, Jalen approached with champagne and the slight smile that had once made her curious about thoughts occupying his clearly active mind. "Congratulations on becoming everything I knew you could become," he said, offering a glass with gesture seeming both casual and carefully planned. The recognition in his voice carried weight she hadn't expected. This wasn't polite acknowledgement of professional success, but genuine appreciation for the journey she had taken. Standing close to him in the mansion's elegant reception room, she caught the subtle cologne he wore and remembered how she had once wondered what it would be like to have his attention focused entirely on her. Their conversation continued long after other guests departed, discussing current projects, future plans, and curatorial work intellectual challenges. Jalen proved a thoughtful listener and insightful commentator, asking questions, demonstrating genuine interest in academic discoveries, and offering perspectives revealing deep engagement with contemporary cultural issues. The Foundation, he explained, had been his primary focus since graduating business school 3 years earlier. While board service was technically family obligation inherited with his trust fund, he approached philanthropy as career rather than social responsibility, working to ensure Foundation resources created lasting impact. "I've watched your career develop with great interest," he admitted as they stood alone in the mansion's library. surrounded by first editions and family portraits spanning generations of Constantine philanthropists. Your approach to recovering forgotten voices aligns perfectly with what philanthropy should accomplish, identifying unrecognized merit and creating opportunities for it to flourish. Eventually, conversation moved from professional topics to personal reflections, both acknowledging shared history, awkwardness at Westbridge. Jalen had never forgotten his admiration for her determination and intelligence, while she had never understood his apparent aloofness during school years. "I should have been braver expressing my feelings then," Jalen said, voice carrying regret for missed opportunities and possibilities they had never explored. But you seemed focused on Braylon, and I didn't want to complicate your happiness with unwanted attention." The admission created a bridge between them that could be crossed or ignored. Nayeli felt the weight of missed connections and alternative histories, wondering how different their lives might have been if teenage insecurities hadn't prevented honest communication about apparently mutual attraction. "I remember thinking you looked down on students like me," she confessed, swirling champagne in her glass as she considered how wrong her perceptions had been. The scholarship kids, the ones who worked in the kitchen and cleaned classrooms. "I assumed your silence meant judgment." "It meant the opposite," Jalen replied, his honesty creating intimacy in the book-lined room where his grandfather's philanthropic legacy surrounded them. "I was 17 and intimidated by someone whose strength came from overcoming real obstacles rather than inheriting advantages. Your determination made my problems seem trivial." As evening concluded, Jalen offered to drive her home, and they found themselves parked outside her building, engaged in conversation neither wanted to end. The late October air carried hints of the winter approaching, but the warmth between them seemed to push back against the seasonal chill. "I would like to take you to dinner," Jalen finally said, directness cutting through careful politeness characterizing their public conversation. Not as foundation trustee speaking to fellowship recipient, but as someone who has admired you for years and would like opportunities to know you better. The proposal was gentle but unmistakably serious, carrying implications extending beyond casual dating. Jalen's resources and social position made him one of the city's most eligible bachelors, but his interest seemed based on qualities having nothing to do with conventional romantic desirability measures. "I'm not sure I'm ready," Nayeli replied honestly, voice revealing conflict between attraction and self-protection his presence awakened. "Divorce left me questioning whether I can trust relationship judgment, and your foundation involvement makes everything more complicated." "I understand," Jalen said, disappointment visible despite acceptance. "The offer remains open whenever you feel ready to explore what might be possible between us." The first proposal had been offered and gently declined, but its existence changed their dynamic in ways influencing every subsequent interaction. Neither realized patience would prove the most important quality their eventual relationship would require. Chapter 6. The Artists. Sanctuary, true legacy, isn't what you build for yourself, it's what you build for others to flourish. The abandoned warehouse in Long Island City stretched before Nayeli like a cathedral of possibility, its 20,000 square feet of raw space echoing with her footsteps as pigeons scattered from steel rafters overhead. Broken windows allowed autumn light to filter through dust motes dancing in the air, while decades-old graffiti covered brick walls like unintentional murals, telling stories of urban decay and artistic rebellion. Standing in the vast emptiness where textile manufacturing equipment had once hummed with industrial purpose, she could envision something revolutionary, a sanctuary where emerging artists could create, exhibit, and sell their work regardless of background or financial resources. The concept had been crystallizing during her deepening friendship with Jalen over the 6 months since the foundation gala. Their relationship had evolved into weekly coffee meetings at a cafe near the Whitney, lengthy conversations during museum visits, and shared attendance at gallery openings, where they discussed the systemic barriers preventing talented artists from accessing traditional exhibition opportunities. Their interactions remained carefully maintained within professional boundaries, though both acknowledged the undercurrent of deeper feelings that charged every conversation with electric possibility. During one particularly intense discussion, while viewing contemporary installations at the Guggenheim, Nayeli had articulated her growing frustration with institutional gatekeeping that perpetuated cultural exclusion. The same biases that buried the women artists I research are still operating today, she explained, gesturing toward works by established artists whose careers had been launched decades earlier. Commercial galleries want artists who already have collector bases. Museums prioritize names that guarantee attendance figures, and emerging artists find themselves trapped in impossible cycles, where they can't gain recognition because they don't already have recognition. Jalen had listened with the careful attention that characterized all their conversations, asking probing questions that revealed his genuine interest in understanding problems he might potentially help solve. His inquiries weren't casual curiosity, but strategic thinking, the kind of analytical approach that had made the Constantine Foundation one of the most effective philanthropic institutions in educational access and cultural preservation. The warehouse discovery happened through serendipity during a research trip to interview Canyon Rashad, whose powerful installations, constructed from Hurricane Sandy debris, had been featured prominently in her second exhibition at the Constantine Cultural Center. Canyon's studio occupied part of a converted factory building in Long Island City, and during their interview about his artistic process and use of reclaimed materials, he mentioned that the adjacent warehouse had been sitting empty for 3 years. The landlord wants someone who'll actually improve the property instead of just extracting profit from it, Canyon explained while showing her photographs of his latest work. He's offering below-market lease rates for the right tenant, someone who understands the community and wants to contribute to what's happening here artistically. Walking through the empty warehouse with Canyon serving as informal guide, Nayeli experienced the same visceral excitement she felt when discovering forgotten masterpieces in private collections or family estates. The space possessed everything emerging artists desperately needed but could rarely afford. Abundant room for both creation and display, soaring ceilings that could accommodate large-scale installations, loading docks that would simplify the transportation of materials and finished pieces, and an industrial aesthetic that perfectly complemented contemporary artistic practices. More significantly, the warehouse's location placed it at the geographic heart of Long Island City's rapidly growing arts community. The neighborhood teemed with converted factory buildings housing artist studios, alternative exhibition spaces, and the kind of creative collaboration that mainstream institutions rarely supported. Young artists living in shared warehouse spaces could walk to openings and performances. Established artists could mentor newcomers without navigating formal institutional hierarchies, and audiences could discover emerging voices in an environment that encouraged experimentation over commercial viability. However, the financial requirements for such an ambitious project seemed insurmountable for someone living on a curator's salary, even one supplemented by occasional consulting fees and lecture honoraria. The lease alone would consume the majority of her annual income. Renovation costs could easily reach 6 figures, depending on the extent of infrastructure improvements needed. And ongoing operational expenses would require either substantial grant funding or significant private investment. Traditional arts organizations might consider such ventures, but they would inevitably impose programming restrictions and bureaucratic oversight that could compromise the experimental, community-responsive atmosphere Nayeli envisioned. She spent the following weeks developing a comprehensive business plan that addressed every practical consideration while preserving the essential vision of truly accessible space for underrepresented artists. The Rising Voices Cultural Center would operate as a hybrid institution, combining gallery, studio complex, and community center functions. Artists could rent studio space at heavily subsidized rates, exhibit their work without paying the commissions that commercial galleries typically demanded, and participate in educational programs designed to help them develop both artistic skills and the business acumen necessary for sustainable creative careers. Programming would specifically emphasize artists from communities that face systematic barriers to traditional institutional recognition. People of color, women, immigrants, residents of economically disadvantaged neighborhoods, artists working in non-traditional media or addressing social issues that mainstream galleries considered uncommercial. Rather than approaching this as charity work, Nayeli conceptualized it as strategic investment in overlooked talent that could significantly enrich contemporary cultural discourse if given appropriate platforms and support systems. The proposal included detailed financial projections showing how the center could achieve operational sustainability through diverse revenue streams, modest studio rental fees, percentage of sales from exhibitions, educational workshop fees, private donations from collectors who discovered new artists through the programming, and grants from foundations interested in supporting innovative cultural initiatives. She had researched similar programs in Detroit, Baltimore, and Phoenix, identifying successful models that had achieved long-term viability while maintaining their commitment to serving emerging and underrepresented artists. 3 days before her scheduled appointment with a potential private investor whose family foundation supported arts education initiatives, Jalen called with an unexpected proposition. He had learned about her project through his network of museum connections and wondered if she might consider foundation support rather than private funding from external sources. The Constantine Foundation has been discussing ways to expand our cultural programming beyond traditional educational grants, he explained during a phone conversation that felt simultaneously professional and intensely personal. Your proposal for the Rising Voices Cultural Center aligns perfectly with our mission of supporting merit that hasn't received appropriate institutional recognition. We'd like to invite you to present to our Cultural Programs Committee. The Foundation's Cultural Committee review took place during an intensive 4-hour session that included detailed discussion of operational sustainability, anticipated community impact, and long-term programming goals. Board members asked challenging questions about audience development strategies, artist selection criteria, and financial management systems that demonstrated they were giving serious consideration to the project's viability rather than simply going through philanthropic motions. J.C. Tanisha, the Foundation's program coordinator, raised important concerns about potential competition with existing arts organizations, wondering whether the Rising Voices Cultural Center might duplicate services already available through other institutions rather than addressing genuine gaps in cultural infrastructure. Nayeli was prepared for this question, having conducted extensive research into contemporary arts support systems that had revealed significant deficiencies in programming for emerging artists, particularly those from underrepresented communities who faced multiple barriers to traditional gallery representation. Other board members questioned whether subsidized artist studios could generate sufficient revenue to sustain operations without requiring continuous foundation support in perpetuity. Again, Nayeli's research proved invaluable, as she could point to successful programs in other cities that had achieved financial sustainability through diversified revenue streams and had actually become self-supporting within 5 to 7 years of initial investment. The final vote was unanimous in favor of funding, though the enthusiasm was tempered by practical concerns about implementation timeline and long-term viability. The Constantine Foundation would provide substantial initial funding for renovation and first-year operations, but ongoing support would depend on Nayeli's ability to develop additional funding sources and demonstrate measurable community impact that justified continued investment. 6 months later, the transformation was nothing short of miraculous. The abandoned warehouse had become a vibrant cultural center that exceeded every projection in the original proposal. The grand opening celebration featured simultaneous exhibitions by 12 emerging artists. Performances by musicians and poets who had never before had access to professional presentation opportunities, and crowds that included both longtime community members and established art world professionals curious about the newest addition to New York's cultural landscape. Sequoia Jamari's installation exploring urban, Native American identity occupied the main gallery space. Her mixed media environments inviting viewers to consider how traditional cultures adapted to contemporary urban settings while maintaining essential spiritual and artistic connections to ancestral practices. Dakota Ania's photographic series documenting gentrification in Queens lined the walls of the community meeting room, her images capturing both the profound losses and remarkable resilience visible in neighborhoods experiencing rapid demographic and economic change. But the real measure of success was visible in the converted studio spaces, where dozens of artists worked on projects that might never have existed without access to affordable creative space and supportive artistic community. The center had become exactly what Nayeli had envisioned, a place where talent could flourish, regardless of economic circumstances, where artistic merit mattered more than commercial potential, and where cultural diversity strengthened rather than threatened institutional programming. Chapter 7. The Second Proposal. Love isn't about perfect timing, it's about perfect understanding. The 5th anniversary celebration of the Rising Voices Cultural Center transformed the warehouse space into a living testament to creative possibility. Its brick walls now adorned with works by artists who had launched successful careers from studios within the building. Sage Zendaya's powerful sculptures addressing environmental racism commanded attention in the main gallery. Their raw materials sourced from contaminated sites across Queens and Brooklyn, while Parvati Wilson's intricate textile installations celebrating indigenous storytelling traditions created intimate spaces for contemplation and reflection. The evening air carried the sounds of authentic celebration, animated conversations conducted in multiple languages, bursts of laughter from families whose children had discovered their own artistic voices through the center's educational programs, and the haunting melodies performed by Kai Martinez, whose innovative compositions bridged traditional Navajo folk music with contemporary urban rhythms. 5 years of continuous operation had not only met, but dramatically exceeded every projection outlined in Nayeli's original proposal to the Constantine Foundation. Over 300 artists had rented studio space at subsidized rates, with an impressive 60% successfully transitioning to gallery representation or museum exhibitions after completing residencies at the center. The educational programs had served more than 1,500 community members annually, ranging from after-school art classes for local children to intensive professional development workshops for emerging artists seeking to navigate the complex business aspects of creative careers. Most significantly for long-term viability, the institution had achieved complete financial sustainability through the diverse revenue streams Nayeli had projected, proving that community-supported arts programming could indeed thrive without compromising artistic integrity or excluding economically disadvantaged participants. The center's success had attracted national attention from cultural institutions, urban planning organizations, and philanthropic foundations across the country, all interested in understanding how the model could be adapted and replicated in their own communities. Nayeli found herself traveling frequently to consult on similar projects in Detroit, Baltimore, and Phoenix, sharing strategies for creating sustainable arts programming that served underserved communities while maintaining the highest standards of artistic excellence. The Rising Voices Cultural Center had evolved from local experiment to nationally recognized model, representing an entirely new approach to cultural accessibility that challenged traditional assumptions about how arts organizations should and could operate. Standing at the edge of the anniversary celebration, observing the dynamic interactions between artists whose careers she had helped nurture and the collectors, critics, and cultural enthusiasts who had discovered them through the center's programming, Nayeli felt the deep satisfaction that comes from witnessing vision transformed into transformative reality through persistent, dedicated effort. Yet even this profound professional fulfillment couldn't entirely address the growing personal loneliness that had deepened with each passing year of total devotion to institutional building and artistic advocacy. Romantic relationships had proven consistently difficult to maintain, given her all-consuming commitment to the center's development and the demanding travel schedule that consulting work required. The men she had dated over the past 5 years either failed to understand the fundamental importance of her work to her sense of identity and purpose, or they seemed to feel threatened and diminished by her professional achievements and growing prominence in cultural circles. Those who expressed appreciation for her success often appeared more interested in her expanding reputation and networking opportunities than in her actual personality, values, or emotional needs, while others were visibly intimidated by her independence and professional prominence in ways that made genuine intimacy impossible. The anniversary exhibition included a comprehensive retrospective section documenting the center's remarkable evolution from abandoned industrial warehouse to thriving cultural institution that had become integral to New York's contemporary arts landscape. Carefully curated displays featured photographs chronicling the renovation process, early exhibitions that had drawn curious audiences to an untested and unconventional venue, and milestone moments that marked the center's successful integration into the established cultural community while maintaining its commitment to experimental and socially engaged programming. Throughout the 5 years since the center's opening, Jalen had attended virtually every major event, fundraiser, and exhibition opening, maintaining a consistent presence that was supportive without being intrusive, offering assistance and advice when specifically requested, but never presuming to impose his opinions on programming decisions or artistic choices. Their friendship had deepened and matured through countless shared experiences, attending cultural events throughout the city, engaging in extensive conversations about arts policy and institutional management, and his unwavering encouragement during the inevitable challenges and setbacks that confronted any experimental cultural venture operating outside traditional institutional frameworks. The foundations continued. Financial support had proven crucial during the center's early years, providing emergency funding when unexpected renovation costs had threatened to delay the opening, underwriting educational programs that couldn't be supported entirely through studio rental income, and facilitating connections with other cultural institutions that had become essential collaborative partners. Yet Jalen had been scrupulously careful to maintain appropriate professional boundaries between his personal feelings for Nayeli and his official responsibilities as a foundation trustee, ensuring that their growing friendship never compromised either the center's institutional independence or the foundation's ethical standards. As the anniversary celebration reached its peak, with hundreds of guests moving through exhibition spaces that pulsed with creative energy and community pride, Jalen approached Nayeli with 2 glasses of wine and the gentle smile that had become familiar and comforting over years of shared attendance at countless cultural events throughout the city. Another remarkably successful milestone for the center, he observed. gesturing toward the crowds of people engaged in animated discussions about art, community development, and cultural preservation. You've created something truly unprecedented. Here, I keep thinking about all the artists who might not have had these opportunities to develop their work and find their audiences if we hadn't been willing to take the considerable risks involved in opening this place, Nayeli replied, her attention drawn to a group of teenagers from the surrounding neighborhood who were examining Orenda Davis's dance-inspired paintings with obvious fascination and engagement. Every career that's been launched, every life that's been changed, every community connection that's been forged, it all started with believing that talent and creativity exist everywhere, just waiting for the right opportunities and support systems. They moved together through the celebration, greeting artists whose careers had been transformed by the center's programming, donors whose financial support had made ambitious projects possible, and community members whose children had discovered their own creative abilities through educational workshops and summer programs. Their easy interaction reflected 5 years of shared investment in the institution's development, a collaborative relationship built on mutual respect and complementary skills. Yet underneath this professional partnership lay undercurrents of personal attraction and emotional connection that had never been fully acknowledged or explored. After the formal presentations had concluded and most guests had moved to the center's cafe space to continue conversations over coffee and dessert, Jalen approached Nayeli with an unusually serious expression that immediately suggested their conversation would venture into territory they had carefully avoided, discussing despite years of deepening friendship and obvious mutual attraction. "Would it be possible for us to talk privately?" he asked, gesturing toward the administrative offices that overlooked the main gallery space, where the anniversary exhibition continued to draw engaged viewers despite the late hour. They settled in Nayeli's office, surrounded by exhibition catalogues documenting 5 years of groundbreaking programming, grant applications that had secured crucial funding for innovative projects, and artist portfolios representing hundreds of careers that had been launched or significantly advanced through the center's support. The space itself reflected her complete evolution, from academic researcher focused on historical recovery to cultural entrepreneur actively shaping contemporary artistic discourse through institutional innovation and community engagement. "I've been thinking extensively about our relationship and its future possibilities," Jalen began, his voice carrying the careful consideration and emotional weight that characterized all his most important communications. "These 5 years of friendship and professional collaboration have revealed qualities in you that extend far beyond what I admired during our school years together. Your unwavering dedication to creating opportunities for others, your remarkable ability to recognize potential that established institutions consistently overlook, your absolute commitment to values that transcend personal ambition and immediate gratification, these qualities make you someone with whom I would very much like to share my life in the deepest and most meaningful sense." The words settled between them with an emotional weight and significance that couldn't be deflected through casual responses or professional redirections. This wasn't simply a romantic proposition, but an offer of genuine partnership built on years of demonstrated compatibility, shared values, and mutual respect that had been tested through numerous challenges and proven resilient across multiple dimensions of experience. "I understand that professional considerations have necessarily complicated our personal relationship," he continued, leaning slightly forward with an intensity that underscored his complete sincerity and emotional investment. "But I hope that 5 years of consistently ethical collaboration and mutual support have demonstrated that my feelings for you exist independently of any foundation business considerations, and that a romantic relationship between us wouldn't compromise either your artistic integrity or the center's institutional independence. Nayeli felt the familiar internal conflict between attraction and self-protection that his presence had always awakened in her. But now, this conflict was complicated by years of friendship that had provided concrete evidence of his character, integrity, and genuine commitment to values that aligned perfectly with her own most deeply held beliefs about art, community, and social responsibility. "I do care for you deeply, more than I've allowed myself to fully acknowledge," she replied, her voice betraying the considerable difficulty of balancing complete honesty with the self-preservation instincts that divorce and professional vulnerability had necessarily strengthened. "But I continue to worry that accepting your proposal would create personal and professional obligations that I'm not prepared to handle responsibly." The Foundation's support has been absolutely crucial to everything I've accomplished here, and I genuinely fear that a romantic relationship would inevitably change the dynamics between us in ways that could potentially compromise both our personal connection and the center's continued independence. "I want to be completely clear about this," Jalen responded, his voice carrying absolute conviction. "The Foundation's support for your work exists because that work unquestionably merits support based on its artistic significance, community impact, and institutional innovation. My personal feelings for you have developed because of who you are as a person, your integrity, intelligence, creativity, and compassion, not because of what you've accomplished professionally, though I deeply admire and respect those accomplishments. Any relationship between us would be built on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine affection, not on gratitude or professional obligation of any kind." They sat together in contemplative silence for several minutes, both fully aware that they were addressing fundamental questions about their future that would inevitably influence every subsequent interaction, regardless of how she ultimately responded to his proposal. Eventually, Nayeli thanked him for his honesty and courage in expressing feelings that she suspected had been developing for years, while explaining that she needed additional time to carefully consider all the personal and professional implications of fundamentally changing their relationship. The second proposal had been offered with far greater sophistication and emotional maturity than the first, acknowledging the genuine complexity of their circumstances while expressing feelings that had been deepened and refined through years of friendship, collaboration, and demonstrated compatibility. Yet once again, Nayeli's response remained characterized by the protective caution that prevented immediate acceptance of what both clearly desired and what years of evidence suggested could be genuinely fulfilling for both of them. Neither fully understood that time and patience would ultimately prove to be their greatest assets, allowing trust and emotional intimacy to develop at exactly the pace that authentic partnership required. Chapter 8, The Family Revelation and Healing. Sometimes the greatest gift is discovering you were never as alone as you thought. The genealogy project had begun as straightforward research for what Nayeli intended to be her most ambitious exhibition yet, a comprehensive celebration of indigenous artistic traditions in contemporary urban settings that would trace the evolution of Native American creative expression from traditional practices to cutting-edge contemporary work. However, what started as academic investigation gradually evolved into an intensely personal journey that would fundamentally transform her understanding of her own family history and its unexpected connections to the institutional support that had shaped her entire adult life. Working closely with Lakota Stone, the museum board member and scholar whose internationally recognized expertise in Native American cultural preservation had made her an invaluable collaborator on multiple projects over the past several years. Nayeli found herself diving deeper into historical archives and family records than she had ever attempted for previous exhibitions. The process required examining not only traditional museum collections and academic databases, but also tribal records, family archives, oral histories, and personal documents that might reveal previously undocumented connections between past and present creative expressions. Understanding your own family's artistic heritage could provide crucial insights that will enrich the exhibition's exploration of cultural continuity across generations. Lakota had suggested during one of their early research planning sessions, many families carry artistic traditions that were never formally recognized or documented by mainstream cultural institutions. But those traditions often survived in forms that continued to influence creative expression within Native communities. The research process proved more complex and time-consuming than either of them had initially anticipated. Native American family histories were often fragmented by federal policies that had deliberately disrupted tribal communities, forced relocations that separated families across vast distances, and educational programs designed to suppress indigenous cultural practices and languages. Documentation was scattered across multiple archives, government agencies, and private collections, requiring extensive travel and careful negotiation with tribal authorities, who were understandably protective of sensitive historical materials. Their search through National Archives collections began with Lakota providing expert guidance through the labyrinthine federal bureaucracy's records related to Indian policy, educational programs, and cultural preservation initiatives. The Bureau of Indian Affairs had maintained surprisingly extensive files on scholarship recipients, vocational training participants, and educational program beneficiaries, creating what amounted to an inadvertent archive of individual stories about Native Americans who had pursued education despite facing systematic institutional barriers and widespread social discrimination. What they discovered in those dusty federal files exceeded even Nayeli's most optimistic expectations about what the research might reveal. Ayanna Morningstar, her beloved grandmother, whose influence had shaped her family's values around education, cultural pride, and community service, had been among the very first recipients of the Constantine Educational Fellowship for Indigenous Students, an innovative program established in 1948 by Theodore Constantine, Jalen's grandfather, as part of expanding post-war efforts to provide educational opportunities for underrepresented populations who had been systematically excluded from higher education. The fellowship had provided comprehensive support that covered not only Ayanna's tuition at Columbia University's prestigious Teachers College, but also living expenses, research costs, and professional development opportunities that enabled her to pursue graduate studies in art education and indigenous cultural preservation at a time when such programs were virtually non-existent at other institutions. The financial support had been complemented by mentorship, networking opportunities, and connections to other scholars and practitioners working in related fields. The archival files contained extensive correspondence between Ayanna and the Constantine Foundation, revealing her as an articulate and passionate advocate for Native American educational access who possessed a sophisticated understanding of how institutional support could be leveraged to create broader opportunities for cultural preservation and community development. Her letters demonstrated remarkable vision for how education could serve not just individual advancement, but collective cultural survival and transformation. After completing her graduate studies, Ayanna had returned to the Southwest to establish innovative art education programs in reservation schools across New Mexico, Arizona, and Colorado. Her pioneering work had directly influenced hundreds of students over the course of a distinguished 30-year teaching career, with many of her former students going on to become prominent artists, educators, cultural leaders, and advocates who carried traditional practices into contemporary contexts, while developing new forms of creative expression that honored ancestral knowledge. Perhaps most significantly, the archives contained a comprehensive collection of photographs, correspondence, and newspaper clippings documenting a groundbreaking 1951 exhibition that Ayana had organized at Columbia University. Traditional Voices, Contemporary Vision had been one of the very first academic presentations of contemporary indigenous art, preceding the more widely publicized exhibitions of the 1960s and 1970s by more than a decade, and establishing crucial scholarly frameworks for understanding Native American artistic practices as living, evolving traditions rather than static historical artifacts preserved in museums. The exhibition had featured student artwork that demonstrated sophisticated integration of traditional Native American techniques, materials, and cultural themes with contemporary artistic methods and modernist aesthetic principles. The work challenged prevailing assumptions about indigenous art while asserting the continuing vitality and relevance of native creative traditions in mid-20th century American culture. Theodore Constantine had not only attended the exhibition opening, but had become one of its most enthusiastic supporters and promoters. The foundation files contained his detailed handwritten notes praising Ayana's innovative educational approach, her success in creating meaningful opportunities for artistic expression that honored traditional practices while engaging with contemporary aesthetic developments, and her remarkable ability to inspire students to see their cultural heritage as a source of strength and creative inspiration rather than an obstacle to overcome. Your cultural work honors me deeply, Ayana had written to Theodore Constantine in a letter dated December 1952, but more importantly, it honors the students and community members who will benefit from opportunities that my generation could barely have imagined possible. Educational access represents nothing less than hope for cultural survival and transformation, ensuring that our most precious traditions can evolve and grow rather than simply disappear under the pressure of assimilationist policies and economic marginalization. Reading her grandmother's eloquent words, Nayeli recognized the voice and values that had fundamentally shaped her own approach to life, education, and community service. The commitment to creating opportunities for others, the understanding of culture as living and dynamic rather than static and preserved, the belief that individual achievement carried obligations to contribute to collective advancement. All of these principles that had guided Nayeli's career could be traced directly to her grandmother's influence and example. The historical connection provided compelling explanations for elements of Nayeli's relationship with Jalen that had always seemed remarkably compatible despite their vastly different backgrounds and life experiences. Their shared commitment to educational access as a tool for social justice, their sophisticated understanding of how cultural institutions could either support or suppress diversity and innovation, and their deep belief in the importance of recognizing and nurturing overlooked potential, all reflected values that had been established and refined through decades of collaboration between their families. This revelation arrived during one of her regular coffee meetings with Jalen at their favorite cafe near the Whitney Museum, as she shared copies of the archival documents that Lakota had helped her locate and interpret. Watching his face as he carefully read his grandfather's correspondence with her grandmother, she saw dawning recognition of connections that neither of them had understood, despite years of friendship and collaborative work. My grandfather rarely spoke about specific fellowship recipients or their individual achievements, Jalen said quietly, studying photographs from Ayana's exhibition that showed young Native American students presenting artwork that demonstrated remarkable sophistication in combining traditional and contemporary techniques. But he kept these files in his personal papers until his death, and I remember him saying on several occasions that the most important educational investments were those that created positive impacts, extending across multiple generations. The historical evidence suggested that Theodore Constantine had approached. Educational philanthropy as strategic investment in long-term cultural continuity and social transformation rather than simple charity directed toward deserving individual recipients. His support for Native American students like Ayanna had been motivated by a sophisticated understanding that educational access could preserve and revitalize cultural traditions that might otherwise be lost to systematic governmental oppression, economic marginalization, and social discrimination. "Our families have been connected for 3 generations," Nayeli said slowly, the full weight of this historical relationship settling around them like recognition of a destiny that had always been present but never previously acknowledged or understood. "Your grandfather's support for my grandmother's education made possible the opportunities that enabled my mother's achievements, which in turn created the foundation for my own academic and professional accomplishments. The discovery fundamentally transformed their relationship from what had seemed like friendship between 2 individuals with coincidentally compatible interests and values into recognition of partnership between families whose commitments had been aligned across decades of social change, cultural evolution, and institutional development. What had appeared to be remarkable personal compatibility was revealed as the continuation of collaborative dedication to educational access, cultural preservation, and community advancement that had been shaping both their family histories for far longer than either of them had realized. The genealogy research had accomplished far more than providing historical background for her planned exhibition on contemporary Native American art. It had revealed family history that connected personal identity with institutional legacy, individual achievement with generational investment, contemporary cultural work with historical commitment to values and principles that transcended individual ambition or personal advancement. Most importantly for Nayeli's emotional and psychological development, the discovery provided crucial context for understanding her own success as part of broader patterns of family achievement that had been made possible by educational access that had been protected, nurtured, and expanded across multiple generations. The Rising Voices Cultural Center represented a direct continuation of her grandmother's pioneering work in creating opportunities for artistic expression and cultural preservation. Just as her curatorial discoveries and advocacy continued Ayanna's lifelong commitment to recognizing and celebrating overlooked cultural contributions. The revelation healed something deep within Nayeli that she had not even fully recognized as wounded. The lingering fear that her achievements might somehow be undermined or diminished by the external institutional support she had received rather than being entirely earned through individual effort and merit. Understanding that her educational opportunities had been made possible by her grandmother's exceptional achievements, and that her current work continued well-established family traditions of cultural advocacy and community service, transformed her relationship with both her own success and the institutional support systems that had enabled it to flourish. Chapter 9. The Third Proposal and Union. When 2 hearts align with purpose, they create love that echoes through generations. The ceremony, honoring 3 generations of Constantine Foundation scholarship recipients, filled Columbia University's historic Great Hall with representatives of educational transformation spanning nearly 8 decades of American social change. Ayanna Morningstar's photograph held a place of special honor among the earliest fellowship recipients, her dignified image surrounded by comprehensive documentation of the innovative educational program she had established, and the hundreds of students whose lives had been fundamentally shaped by her unwavering commitment to cultural preservation through academic excellence and community engagement. The evening's program included presentations from current scholarship recipients whose diverse projects demonstrated the Foundation's continued evolution to address contemporary challenges while maintaining absolute fidelity to its founding Principles of supporting merit, regardless of economic circumstances or social background. Tala Johnson presented her groundbreaking research on environmental justice issues affecting Native American communities, while Mika Thompson discussed his innovative theatrical work that addressed immigration experiences through traditional storytelling techniques adapted for contemporary urban audiences. The gathered crowd represented a living testament to the Foundation's impact across multiple generations and diverse communities. Former recipients now occupied positions of influence across academia, government, arts organizations, and private enterprises, their combined achievements creating ripple effects that had touched thousands of lives beyond their individual successes. The energy in the hall reflected not just celebration, but renewed commitment to expanding educational access for future generations facing contemporary barriers. Jalen's keynote address focused specifically on the complex relationships between individual achievement and institutional support, providing detailed explanations of how strategic educational access created ripple effects that extended far beyond specific recipients to influence entire communities, preserve cultural traditions, and generate cycles of advancement that could transform social structures across multiple generations. His carefully crafted words carried personal significance that only Nayeli fully understood, reflecting their recent discoveries about historical connections that had been shaping both their family's commitment to educational philanthropy for far longer than either had previously realized. Educational investment creates returns that compound exponentially across generations, he said, his gaze finding and holding Nayeli's as he spoke to the assembled audience of scholars, artists, activists, and community leaders. When we support one student's academic achievement, we enable that individual to create opportunities for countless others, establishing sustainable cycles of advancement that transform communities and preserve cultural traditions that might otherwise be lost. To economic barriers, social discrimination, and institutional neglect. As Jalen spoke, Nayeli found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The scholarship girl who had once felt invisible in academic institutions was now seated in the front row of Columbia's most prestigious auditorium, recognized as a leader in cultural preservation and institutional innovation. The nervous teenager who had cleaned classrooms to maintain her place at Westbridge Academy had become someone whose opinion was sought by museum directors, foundation trustees, and policymakers across multiple sectors. The keynote was followed by a comprehensive panel discussion featuring scholarship recipients from different decades, whose diverse career trajectories illustrated the Foundation's remarkable success in identifying and nurturing talent across multiple fields and communities. Former recipients had become museum directors, research scientists, community activists, business leaders, educators, artists, and public servants whose combined contributions had influenced virtually every sector of American society. Dr. Maria Santos, a fellowship recipient from the 1980s, described how foundation support had enabled her to become the first in her family to attend graduate school, eventually leading to breakthrough research in renewable energy technologies that were now being implemented globally. James River Wind, supported in the 1990s, had used his education to establish legal advocacy programs protecting tribal lands and cultural resources across the Southwest. Each story demonstrated the multiplier effect of strategic educational investment, showing how individual support created broader community benefits. Following the formal presentations, guests moved to Columbia's beautifully landscaped sculpture garden for an elegant reception that continued conversations about educational access, cultural preservation, institutional accountability, and collaborative strategies for addressing contemporary challenges facing students from underrepresented communities. The evening air carried the energy of celebration, mixed with serious intellectual discourse about policy changes, funding priorities, and innovative approaches to supporting educational achievement among populations that continued to face systematic barriers. The sculpture garden had been transformed into an outdoor gallery, showcasing works by fellowship recipients who had pursued artistic careers. Solar-powered lighting illuminated pieces that represented decades of creative expression, from traditional techniques preserved and evolved through contemporary practice to cutting-edge digital installations addressing current social issues. The setting created perfect backdrop for conversations bridging past achievements with future possibilities. Nayeli found herself engaged in multiple conversations with scholarship recipients from different generations, learning about projects and achievements that demonstrated the foundation's continued relevance and effectiveness across rapidly changing social and economic circumstances. The stories revealed consistent patterns of institutional impact that extended far beyond individual success to influence entire professional fields, cultural movements, and community development initiatives. Standing near a sculpture created by Phoenix Tavian, one of the Rising Voices Cultural Center's most successful alumni, she marveled at how individual support had created expanding circles of opportunity. Phoenix's success had inspired younger artists in his community. His teaching work had influenced dozens of students, and his public installations had changed conversations about urban development and cultural inclusion in 3 major cities. As the reception reached its peak, with hundreds of guests engaged in animated discussions throughout the sculpture garden's beautifully illuminated pathways, Jalen approached Nayeli with 2 glasses of champagne and an expression that immediately suggested their conversation would venture into emotional territory they had been carefully approaching for months since the genealogy discoveries that had transformed their understanding of their family's intertwined historical relationship. "Would it be possible for us to take a brief walk?" he asked, gesturing toward the campus pathways that wound between buildings where both their grandparents had studied and worked 7 decades earlier, creating educational legacies that had ultimately brought their families together across generations of collaborative commitment to social justice and cultural preservation. They found themselves seated on a weathered wooden bench overlooking the central quad, where current students hurried between evening classes and study sessions, their animated conversations creating a constant backdrop of intellectual energy that perfectly reflected the university's continuing mission of educational transformation and scholarly excellence. The setting felt entirely appropriate for discussing future plans that would honor past commitments while creating new opportunities for collaboration between educational access and cultural advancement. The campus at night held a different energy than during daylight hours. Warm light spilled from library windows, where students pursued the same dreams of advancement that had driven both their grandparents decades earlier. The Gothic architecture seemed to whisper stories of all the lives that had been changed within. These walls, all the barriers that had been overcome through education's transformative power. The genealogy research has fundamentally changed how I understand our relationship and its historical significance, Jalen began, his voice carrying the careful consideration and emotional depth that had characterized all their most important conversations throughout 7 years of deepening friendship. Professional collaboration and gradual recognition of mutual attraction that had never been fully acknowledged or explored. Discovering that our families have been collaborating for 3 generations doesn't create any kind of obligation or expectation, but it does provide crucial context that makes me far more confident about expressing feelings I've been carrying for many years without fully understanding their deeper significance. His words carried accumulated weight from years of patient friendship. demonstrated professional compatibility and growing personal trust that had been tested through numerous challenges and proven resilient across multiple dimensions of shared experience. Unlike his previous proposals, this declaration was supported by extensive evidence of sustained partnership that had proven their ability to maintain both individual integrity and collaborative effectiveness without compromising either personal authenticity or institutional independence. I want to be completely transparent about my motivations and intentions, he continued, turning to face her directly with an intensity that underscored his complete emotional investment in their conversation and its potential outcomes. I'm not proposing because of historical family connections or professional compatibility or shared institutional commitments, though I deeply value all of those elements of our relationship. I'm proposing because 7 years of friendship and collaboration have revealed qualities in you that I want to share my life with in the deepest possible sense. Integrity that never compromises essential principles for temporary convenience. Intelligence that continues expanding through every new experience. Creativity that finds innovative solutions to seemingly impossible challenges. And unwavering commitment to values that transcend personal ambition or individual advancement. The proposal represented both familiar territory and entirely new emotional ground, carrying confidence that came from years of demonstrated compatibility, while fully acknowledging the genuine complexity of their personal and professional circumstances. Jalen had learned patience and emotional maturity through years of respectful waiting and careful attention to her needs and boundaries, while Nayeli had gained crucial clarity about her own feelings through extensive time and shared experience that had proven their partnership could enhance, rather than compromise, her hard-won independence and professional achievements. "I love you," she replied, the simple admission carrying profound relief at finally expressing feelings she had been carefully protecting and analyzing for years without fully allowing herself to acknowledge their depth and significance. Not because of foundation support or family history or professional collaboration, though I'm grateful for all of those elements of our connection. I love you because you've shown me what authentic partnership can look like when it's built on genuine, mutual respect, shared values, and commitment to supporting each other's individual growth, rather than seeking to control or diminish it for personal comfort or social convenience. Her acceptance had been made possible by years of concrete evidence that their relationship could successfully navigate professional complexity, family expectations, external pressures, and individual career demands without losing the essential qualities that made their connection valuable, sustainable, and genuinely fulfilling for both of them. They had learned to trust each other across multiple dimensions of experience, creating emotional and intellectual foundation for romantic partnership that was far stronger and more reliable than initial physical attraction. Social compatibility or shared cultural background, the moment felt suspended in time, with generations of family history converging on this single decision that would shape their shared future. Around them, the university campus hummed with the quiet energy of intellectual pursuit, the same energy that had drawn their grandparents together in service of educational access and cultural preservation. The continuity was both humbling and inspiring. The engagement was officially announced 6 months later during another major foundation event, surrounded by colleagues, friends, artists, scholars, and community members who had observed their relationship develop through years of careful friendship that had clearly been moving toward deeper commitment despite their caution about mixing personal and professional responsibilities. The announcement was met with widespread enthusiasm that reflected general recognition that their partnership made sense not just personally but institutionally, combining complementary resources, expertise, and networks in ways that could significantly amplify their individual contributions to educational access and cultural preservation. The months of engagement planning became opportunities to integrate their families' legacies in meaningful ways. They visited Ayanna Morningstar's gravesite in New Mexico, where tribal elders performed blessings for the union. They toured Theodore Constantine's childhood home in New England, where Foundation archives preserved letters revealing the philosophical foundations of educational philanthropy. Each step in their planning process honored the past while affirming their commitment to expanding its impact into future generations. The wedding ceremony took place the following January in the main gallery of the Rising Voices Cultural Center, surrounded by artists whose careers had been launched through the institution's programming and colleagues whose work had been supported by Foundation, initiatives spanning multiple decades of social change and cultural evolution. The ceremony reflected values that had guided both their families for generations: unwavering commitment to community advancement, deep respect for cultural diversity and artistic innovation, and absolute belief in the transformative power of educational access as a tool for social justice and individual empowerment. The couple had chosen to write their own vows, words that spoke not only to their personal commitment, but to the legacy they intended to build together. Nayeli's vows began with gratitude to the ancestors whose struggles had made their meeting possible, acknowledging both Ayanna Morningstar's pioneering educational work and Theodore Constantine's visionary philanthropy. She promised to honor their example by continuing to create opportunities for others to flourish, to recognize potential where established institutions saw only obstacles, and to remember that individual success carried obligations to collective advancement. I promise to plant seeds in silence and tend gardens in shadows, Nayeli said, her voice carrying across the transformed warehouse space filled with friends, family, and beneficiaries of their shared commitment to cultural and educational advancement. I promise to see in you not just the man I love, but the partner who shares my understanding that our happiness has meaning only when it creates pathways for others to find their own fulfillment and purpose. Jalen's vows echoed themes of service and partnership, acknowledging the privilege his inheritance represented while committing to use that privilege as a tool for justice rather than personal comfort. He spoke about learning from Nayeli's example, that true wealth lay not in accumulation, but in circulation, not in what they could acquire for themselves, but in what they could make possible for others. I promise to support your vision while nurturing my own, to use inherited advantages as foundation for expanding opportunities rather than protecting comfort, and to remember that our love story has significance only as part of the larger story of human dignity, creative expression, and educational access that our families have been writing together for 3 generations, the ceremony space itself told. Their story through carefully chosen details that honored both family legacies while looking toward future possibilities. Ayanna Morningstar's original artwork hung beside contemporary pieces from center artists, creating visual dialogue between past and present cultural expression. Theodore Constantine's fountain pen, used to establish the first educational fellowship, rested on the signing table, alongside traditional Native American sage, blessed by tribal elders who had traveled from New Mexico to witness this union of families and purposes. Wedding guests included scholarship recipients representing 3 full generations of Foundation programming, artists whose works were permanently displayed throughout the center's exhibition spaces, museum directors and cultural leaders who had collaborated on groundbreaking exhibitions and educational initiatives, and community members whose children had been served by the center's comprehensive educational programming. The celebration honored not just personal commitment and romantic love, but institutional legacy that connected individual happiness with broader social impact and generational responsibility. Canyon Rashad had created a special installation for the reception, constructed entirely from materials representing transformation and renewal. Hurricane debris had been reformed into sculpture, subway tiles arranged into mosaics, spelling out words of blessing in multiple languages, and reclaimed wood bearing the signatures of every artist who had found their voice within the center's walls. The piece stood as testament to the possibility of creating beauty from brokenness, hope from destruction, and community from isolation. The reception featured performances by center alumni who had achieved national recognition, their success creating ripple effects that had inspired younger artists throughout the community. Sage Zendaya's environmental installations had evolved into major museum commissions addressing climate change impacts on urban communities. Dakota Ania's photography documenting gentrification had influenced housing policy in 3 major cities. Each success story demonstrated the multiplier effect of strategic cultural investment. As the evening progressed, spontaneous speeches emerged from guests whose lives had been touched by the Foundation's work or the Center's programming. A former fellowship recipient, now a federal judge, spoke about opportunities that had seemed impossible before institutional support made them achievable. A teenager from the neighborhood described discovering her artistic abilities through after-school programs, her parents beaming with pride at their daughter's newfound confidence and purpose. The marriage represented a direct continuation of collaborative family commitment that had begun with Theodore Constantine's support for Ayanna Morningstar's education in the 1940s and had evolved through decades of institutional development, cultural programming, and educational initiatives that had made possible contemporary advances in both educational access and cultural preservation. Their partnership promised to extend and expand that historical legacy into future generations while creating entirely new opportunities for innovative collaboration between educational philanthropy and cultural advocacy. What neither could fully anticipate was how their marriage would enhance their individual effectiveness while creating unprecedented possibilities for institutional innovation and social impact that neither could have achieved working independently, no matter how talented, dedicated, or well-resourced they might have been as individuals. Their union represented not just personal fulfillment, but strategic alliance for social transformation, combining complementary expertise and resources in service of expanding opportunity for future generations of artists, scholars, and community leaders. Chapter 10. The Fool. Reunion, Triumph, and Legacy Unveiling. Queens don't seek revenge, they simply let their legacy speak them. Truth. The Westbridge Academy Reunion Committee had transformed the Connecticut School's Grand Ballroom into elegant space, celebrating 14 years of alumni achievements while honoring the institution's tradition of educational excellence. Displays showcased notable graduates' accomplishments, scientific breakthroughs, artistic achievements, business innovations, and public service contributions, demonstrating the school's success preparing students for leadership across diverse fields. Nayeli adjusted her grandmother's turquoise necklace, each stone carrying family history now intimately connected to her own story. The elegant dress she had chosen balanced sophistication with accessibility, expensive enough to command respect, but understated enough to avoid overshadowing the evening's real purpose. At 32, she possessed something her 18-year-old self could never have imagined: complete confidence in her own worth regardless of external validation. The scholarship girl, who had cleaned classrooms to maintain her place, had become someone whose opinion was sought by museum directors, whose projects were funded by prestigious foundations, and whose work had launched hundreds of artistic careers. Transformation wasn't just personal, but institutional. The Rising Voices Cultural Center had evolved from experimental project to established institution, its programming replicated in 12 cities. The Constantine Nayeli Foundation had been announced 6 months earlier, combining resources from both family legacies to create educational and cultural opportunities, honoring their grandparents' collaborative history while addressing contemporary challenges. Jalen appeared wearing a tuxedo, emphasizing natural elegance without suggesting arrogance, his presence filling space with calm confidence that had become foundation of their partnership. Their 8 months of marriage had proven their relationship could enhance individual effectiveness while creating collaborative possibilities neither could have achieved alone. The reunion reception was already underway when they arrived, with classmates clustered in groups largely reflecting the same social divisions characterizing their teenage relationships. Successful professionals mingled with others who had achieved varying degrees of career advancement, but underlying hierarchies seemed remarkably unchanged despite 14 years of diverse experiences. Ayana Cooper approached immediately, enthusiasm genuine, as she congratulated Nayeli on achievements documented in alumni publications and cultural media coverage. Their conversation revealed Ayana had become a pediatric nurse practitioner working in community health centers, her career reflecting the same service commitment characterizing her student years. Other classmates joined the conversation, expressing curiosity about Nayeli's work and surprise at her prominence in cultural circles they had never imagined her entering. Keisha Taylor described her social work career, while Jamari Lewis had become a high school principal in Detroit, both having pursued paths focused on community service rather than personal advancement. But reunion's social dynamics remained dominated by students whose inherited advantages had translated into expected career trajectories. River Jackson had joined his family's investment firm. Canyon Hayes was practicing law at a prestigious Manhattan firm, and others had assumed roles accessible through family connections rather than individual merit. Formal program began with recognition of class achievements, including brief presentations from alumni whose careers represented the school's commitment to preparing leaders across diverse fields. Nayeli had been invited to speak about cultural entrepreneurship and institutional innovation, topics connecting individual success with broader social impact. Her presentation focused on relationships between educational access and cultural preservation, explaining how institutions could either support or suppress diverse voices, depending on their commitment to recognizing merit regardless of economic background or social connections. Educational privilege creates obligations as well as opportunities, she concluded, looking at classmates whose career trajectories had been largely determined by advantages they had inherited rather than earned. Those of us who benefited from excellent education have responsibilities to ensure similar opportunities become available to students who face economic barriers we were fortunate enough to avoid. During dinner, she found herself seated with classmates whose careers had developed along predictable paths, successful but conventional, comfortable but unremarkable, prosperous but lacking impact, creating lasting change. Their conversation topics focused on material acquisitions, family updates, and social activities, suggesting lives primarily focused on personal satisfaction rather than broader contribution. Evening's emotional climax arrived unexpectedly during dessert, when Braylon Ashworth appeared at their table with confidence, seeming forced rather than natural. Intervening years had not been kind to his physical appearance or apparent career trajectory, though he maintained the same casual arrogance that once seemed sophisticated but now appeared desperate. Well, Braylon said, voice carrying undertones intended as playful mockery, but coming across as bitter disappointment. If it isn't our little scholarship girl, still playing dress-up with people who actually belong in places like this. Comment was intended to wound, to reduce her achievements to performance, rather than recognize her legitimate membership in social and professional circles that had once seemed inaccessible. Instead of feeling injured, Nayeli felt pity for someone whose life had clearly failed to meet his own inflated expectations. I heard you're running some kind of charity art project, he continued, apparently interpreting her silence as permission to elaborate his attack. Very noble of you to help those people express themselves, though I imagine it's quite different from institutions where real collectors and serious cultural figures actually spend their time." Before she could respond, evening's final presentation began with announcement commanding immediate attention from every guest. The school's development director had taken the podium to recognize the evening's most distinguished alumnus, whose contributions to education and culture represented highest ideals of Westbridge Academy's mission. "Ladies and gentlemen," the director announced, "please welcome Jalen Constantine, class of 2011, whose philanthropic leadership has transformed educational access for thousands of students while supporting cultural programming that enriches communities nationwide." Introduction continued, with details about the Constantine Foundation's impact over 13 years of operation, the Rising Voices Cultural Center's national influence, and the newly established Constantine Nayeli Foundation's ambitious goals for expanding educational and cultural opportunities across underserved communities. Jalen's presentation focused on relationships between individual privilege and social responsibility, explaining how inherited advantages could be used either for personal benefit or community advancement. "Tonight's celebration honors individual achievements," he said, voice-carrying authority, commanding respect from classmates who had never recognized his leadership potential during school years. "But most meaningful achievements are those creating opportunities for others to succeed." The Constantine Nayeli Foundation represents our commitment to ensuring talented students receive support regardless of economic circumstances. Announcement of $100 million endowment for educational scholarships and cultural programming created immediate recognition that their classmate had become a figure of national significance, whose decisions influenced thousands of lives and hundreds of institutions. My wife Nayeli's work demonstrates how individual excellence can create institutional change when supported by adequate resources and collaborative partnerships, Jalen continued, acknowledging her contributions while making clear their marriage represented partnership between equals rather than patronage. Applause was sustained and genuine, reflecting recognition that their classmates had achieved something remarkable, extending far beyond personal success to influence broader social change. As formal presentations concluded, Braylon approached their table one final time, earlier arrogance replaced by something that might have been recognition of his own limitations. "I guess I misunderstood what you were building," he said, voice lacking confident mockery, characterizing earlier comments. Nayeli felt no satisfaction from his apparent recognition of error, only sadness for someone whose life had been constrained by assumptions about success, preventing him from recognizing opportunities for more meaningful achievement. "We all make choices about what kind of impact we want to create," she replied, gathering her evening bag while Jalen signed programs for classmates wanting mementos. "I hope you find work that brings you satisfaction." They left the reunion hand in hand, not as conquering heroes seeking validation, but as partners whose collaborative work was creating lasting change, influencing generations of students and artists yet to come. Evening had provided opportunity to share accomplishments with former classmates, but more importantly, it confirmed their values and priorities had been shaped by experiences transcending social hierarchies that had once seemed so important. Real reunion was not with former classmates, but with ongoing work connecting their individual happiness with broader social impact. Their legacy would be measured not by recognition from people who had shared their teenage years, but by opportunities created for people they might never meet.